Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett continuing his historic visit to Washington D.C., but will his new proposals fall on deaf ears? Meantime, Israel releasing new data on vaccines, including on the adverse effects. And finally, day 2 of the Paralympics in Tokyo are upon us, so stay tuned for the latest, live from Japan, as we sit down with the director of the Israeli team. We begin tonight with continued violence along the southeastern border. Israeli soldiers firing tear gas, rubber bullets, and at times small caliber live fire to keep hundreds of rioting Palestinians away from the Gaza security fence. Gaza medics, for their part, reporting over a dozen injured. Meantime, the violent demonstrations coming along with continued arson balloons despite Hamas's assurances to quell the crowds in efforts of maintaining negotiations with Israel via Egypt. However, Hamas doesn't seem to have taken this task very seriously, as the riots themselves are organized by the Gaza terror group. Additionally, Hamas alleging that the large crowds which they organized managed to bypass their so-called peacekeepers, Hamas affiliates donning bright yellow vests along the border. Hamas's given reason being that they were just too few peacekeepers present, though images of these peacekeepers also showing that most were barely even teenagers. Israel, on the other hand, making good on its ceasefire promises, Jerusalem agreeing to issue 1,000 additional entry permits to Gaza merchants. Also, Qatari aid and officials and civilian goods and equipment have been allowed to cross into the Strip. Moving on, Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett continuing in his first official visit to the United States, officials in D.C. promising to maintain strong connections and support for Israel.
I bring from Israel a new spirit, a spirit of folks who sometimes harbor different opinions but work together in cooperation, in goodwill, in a spirit of unity, and we work hard to find the common things that we do agree upon and move forward on it. And it seems to be working.
Additionally, aside from Secretary of State Blinken, Bennett has met up with AIPAC CEO Howard Kohr and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ahead of his meetings with President Biden. Bennett is expected to outline for the president his alternative to the JCPOA nuclear agreement. But with us now to discuss is ILTV reporter Asaf Nissan. Asaf, thank you as always for being with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so what are we expecting to see at this meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Bennett?
We're expecting both sides to be very adamant on what they want to bring to the table. We're going to see Biden, the administration, trying to push in a more diplomatic solution. As for the fact they do believe that the diplomatic channel will be the way to end up with a more normal deal, or maybe even disqualifying the current deal or any sorts of needed deal on the table. But Israel, on the other hand, will try to place an alternative, either not to have one at all, or maybe somewhat of a softer version that can help, well, not even prevent at this point with the fact that the nuclear bomb is pretty much imminent, but...
Well, we've heard, a brief suggested outline of what Bennett's alternative to the JCPOA might include, which, is a cooperation of a coalition, rather, of various countries and certain economic sanctions and things like that, and of course leaving aside the option for Bennett and Israel to continue certain attacks against Iran directly. But it's been suggested actually that the White House knows how lost the Iran deal might actually be and is therefore more open to Israeli proposals. Is that true? How will the Biden administration react?
Well, from what we're seeing, a lot of voices, including government officials in the Biden administration, saying they know the deal's over. Iran's never going to come back to the table the way it was, because especially with the bomb imminent and IC in power, we're not expecting any changes in policy towards a new deal. What they're going to expect pretty much is a much more prominent show of force, maybe a way to sweeten some of the suggestions, but in the end of the day, we're still going to see the U.S. more understanding the fact that Iran will not come back to the table.
All right, now, according to the New York Times, one of the issues expected to come up here in the meeting is Israel's need to continue covert operations in Iran, even if a new JCPOA agreement is signed. Why is that? How are the intelligence communities of Israel and the United States intertwined when it comes to Iran?
So for this two-parter, we're actually going to start with the second one, because we are talking about a history that's come along ever since the U.S. lost control of Iran, let's say, during the revolution, 79. The U.S. has never really been able to push back a full range of intelligence network such as Israel, and therefore has been more dependent on Israel's intelligence in the last years more than anyone else. Now, they want to change that force. They want to bring back the intelligence grid done by the U.S., but in order to do so, they have to pretty much cooperate with Israel. Now, we've seen this cooperation happen during the Trump and Netanyahu administration to a height where we know the results, of course, being the withdrawal of the U.S. from the nuclear deal and Israel's more prominent and more aggressive attack towards Iran. But with the Biden administration, we've seen a lot of disdain and a lot of mistrust between Biden and Netanyahu, because Netanyahu, of course, sees Biden as still as a former VP for Obama, which, of course, Obama was the architect of the nuclear deal. And because of that, he still can't trust him that much. But now with the new regime in power and Bennett being much more open to the U.S. administration, they're hoping to rebuild that trust.
Sure, and it sounds like with the Biden administration lacking an intelligence apparatus in Iran,
exactly,
maybe they might be reliant on that. Real quick answer, we've heard talk of big changes in the U.S. visa policy. Anything to add about that?
Well, from the meeting we've seen yesterday from Prime Minister Bennett and Secretary of State Blinken, Israel might be on a fast track to finally get the waiver they wanted for visas. Israelis have been suffering for years from a lack of acceptance of visas to the U.S., and now, finally, with a push from Blinken himself, actually, we might see the change.
And during COVID, of all times when travel is severely restricted.
Exactly.
All right. Asaf, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Now back to coronavirus. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back with the latest pandemic regulations. Authorities now reversing their decision that would require negative COVID tests at the entrances to schools. And this just 7 days before the start of the school year. Health Minister Horowitz and Attorney General Mandelblit explaining that there's no legal way to prevent children from coming into the school building, and certainly not by essentially forcing medical procedures. But the reversal coming just 2 days after the COVID cabinet voted to expand the Green Pass program to include educational facilities, their students and their staff. Horowitz previously promising to give parents the tools to conduct the self-tests, and adding that if a child shows up without a note, individual principals and teachers would have had the discretion for sending the kid home or testing on the spot. Meantime, all of this, as another operation considered imperative to reopening the schools, has also been put on hold. The serological testing plan for kids under 12 completely frozen on Wednesday after severe problems with the registry website were discovered. It's unclear then if any serious plan for preventing the spread of infections in schools remains. Deputy Attorney General Raz Nizli saying that the rest of the school-related COVID regulations are under a process of review, with the final decisions set to be announced soon. Now, regardless of regulations and restrictions, the best way to avoid coronavirus infection remains vaccination, particularly if you want to avoid serious or critical illness. At least so says recent health reports. And with Israel playing the part of vaccine lab rat for the entire world, there's plenty of data now to back it up. The third dose of the COVID-19 vaccine is proving 95% effective against the virus, including the Delta variant, some 2 weeks after receipt. And even if infected, it's at least 97% effective against serious symptoms too. This according to the latest from the Israeli Health Ministry data, which is closely tracking the health of over 1.67 million Israelis that have received the booster shot thus far. Of course, vaccines come with their own risks, and many concerned critics are pointing to several adverse side effects that have been associated with the drugs. That said, new research from Israel published to the New England Journal of Medicine showing that unvaccinated patients face far scarier odds if infected, both in terms of the virus and its related issues. Individuals who received the Pfizer vaccine, for example, have been reported to suffer from myocarditis or inflammation of the heart. But unvaccinated people who get COVID are 4 times more likely to develop this condition. Likewise, among the 24 other potential side effects of the vaccine, patients are most likely to experience swollen lymph nodes, appendicitis, and herpes zoster, which can lead to chickenpox and shingles. But unvaxxed patients face greatly increased risk of not just myocarditis, but pericarditis, arrhythmias, heart attacks, strokes, pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, acute kidney damage, and more. So please, if you're eligible, go and get your vaccination. In other news, more and more Israelis are falling seriously ill with coronavirus, and primarily among the unvaccinated demographics. Hospital staff sharing horror stories from their respective ICUs, many of which have already closed due to the overcrowding. With me to discuss is head of internal medicine at Israel's Sheba Medical Center, Dr. Gadi Segal. Dr. Segal, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Now, we've heard that the unvaccinated patients are getting the worst end of this disease, but how big of a difference are we really talking about? Can you describe the severity of the symptoms for an unvaccinated patient versus a vaccinated patient from the same demographic?
Yes, we must remember that COVID-19 is let's say, three-modal disease. It begins like a flu-like illness with a stage of viremia in which the viral particles are being multiplying in the bloodstream and in the tissues. And the patient experiences very harsh flu-like symptoms, high-grade fever, myalgia, which is diffuse muscular pain, fatigue, nausea, loss of appetite, and everyone knows the flu-like syndrome. And this is the viral disease. Now, we are dependent upon our immune system in order to evade the transformation, the transition from the viral stage to the inflammatory stage. And I can tell you that as far as I see, this is the main issue, the main difference between vaccinated and non-vaccinated patients. The vaccinated patients are staying within the viral disease and they do not deteriorate, or we should say more correctly, the vast majority of the vaccinated patients do not deteriorate from the viral disease, the flu-like symptoms, to the severe pneumonia, which necessitates high supply or high demand of oxygen and steroids and so on. So I can differentiate very good between vaccinated and non-vaccinated according to their tendency for deterioration from one phase to the other. By the way, vaccinated patients which have immune deficiency because of other background treatments or diseases behave pretty much like the unvaccinated patients. So currently, with our accumulating experience, we can say that this is indeed the role of the immune system. The intact immune system defends us from deteriorating.
All right, now patients have supposedly been expressing regret practically on their deathbeds oftentimes for not getting vaccinated. Have you heard any of these such regrets? Have you been hearing people speaking like this?
Yes, of course, but you must know that when we meet the unvaccinated patient when he's already ill, it's like water under the bridge. Nothing good will come out of discussing it. And I'm a physician, I'm not a lecturer or a policeman. So it is not my role to discuss the lessons to be learned when the patient is acutely ill. So I do hear that. I most often hear family members regretting for their beloved ones not getting vaccinated for all kinds of reasons. The most common reason is when they say that it was a fake news that caused them not to vaccinate. But I do not elaborate on that. We do not develop this issue to conversation. It is inappropriate to deal with that during the acute disease.
So what do you say to these such patients and their families when they speak this way, if anything?
That currently it doesn't matter, and currently we look only ahead, and we are doing most of our efforts to recover. And when they recover, I do ask them, now after you saw the horrors of COVID-19, please be a good messenger and keep your beloved ones healthy and ask them to get vaccinated. By the way, I tell this to all my patients, both vaccinated and non-vaccinated. I think that the recovered patients are the best sentinels, the best messengers for this message. Get vaccinated soon.
Dr. Gadi Segal, thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
You're welcome.
Now, as the Jewish high holidays begin, thousands of worshipers are expected to visit the Western Wall Plaza in Jerusalem. So the Health Ministry and the Western Wall Heritage Foundation partnering to prepare the space for safely handling the crowds. Hannah Rifkin with the details.
Twice a year, every year, for at least the last 3 centuries, a rabbi with the Western Wall Heritage Foundation arrives with a team of cleaners to clear out thousands of prayer notes from between the cracks of the stones at the holy site. And assuming the notes bear the name of God in writing, they're buried atop the Mount of Olives. But that's not the only annual tradition now beginning. It's just the only tradition seemingly unaffected by coronavirus. Every year, as the summer ends, hundreds of thousands of Jews arrive to pray at the Western Wall. The visitors asking God and their community members for forgiveness, or slichot, before Rosh Hashanah, or the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. So, to prevent the events from becoming COVID superspreader incidents, Israeli authorities taking preemptive action. Starting Thursday, August 26th, the Western Wall Plaza will be divided into prayer capsules, with separation barriers being erected. Entry will also only be limited to 10,000 worshipers at a time, and all visitors will be required to wear masks and adhere to instructions from ushers. Perhaps most importantly, though, the Western Wall Heritage Foundation asking visitors to arrive early in the evenings for services and to try to come in the earlier days of the Slichot period itself, rather than overcrowding the holy site at the last minute before the holidays. If overcrowding becomes an issue, entry will be closed. Then finally, for those who can't make it, Slichot services will be live streamed at thekotel.org every midnight on the following days until the eve of Yom Kippur, September 14th. Hannah Rifkin, ILTV.
All right, flying back to Tokyo, it's been 2 days since the opening ceremonies at the 2020-2021 Paralympic Games. And already Israeli athletes are off to a strong start, with 34-year-old Arab-Israeli Iyad Shalabi earning gold in the men's 100-meter backstroke. There's still plenty of time left in the competition, though, and the whole nation is rallying behind the remaining athletes.
אני רוצה לאחל המון המון בהצלחה למשלחת הפראלימפית של ישראל במשחקים הפראלימפיים בטוקיו. ולכל עם ישראל, שיהיה שנה טובה ומתוקה.
Joining me now with more, all the way from Japan, is Ron Bolotin, Israel's Paralympic Committee Sports Director and head of the delegation to Tokyo. Ron, thanks so much for being with us. Now yesterday we had swimming and goalball. Iyad Shalabi winning gold and the goalball team advancing with an 11-1 win over Australia. Then today we had more swimming, more goalball, and table tennis. Israel advancing in table tennis. I've yet to see the results for goalball, but how do you feel so far about Team Israel's chances at the games as they progress?
Our feeling is like, I think the word is mountain railway, mountain train. Yesterday we've been so excited from the gold medal of Iyad Shalabi, an amazing athlete and a person. But this morning we had a big disappointment in the swimming when Ami Dadon, who is a world record holder, was disqualified in the heats. He finished the 100-meter freestyle first with the Paralympic record, but he was disqualified because he was moving before the start. And it's a missing gold medal, we hope so too. But 2 hours later, we have a huge surprise by Caroline Tabib, who won against the Jordanian table tennis player, who was ranked second in the world. And now I just came back from the goalball team that lost to Canada 2-6. So it's changing every hour. So I'm sure we'll have more success and more disappointment. This is sport.
All right, going back to Shalabi, you must be incredibly proud of him, as we all are, as I'm sure that he is of himself. And I know that you yourself are a Paralympic swimmer with 11 medals, 3 of which are gold. As a former swimmer, do you see any of yourself in Shalabi?
First of all, Shalabi is a special guy. As you know, he was born deaf and mute, but when he was young, he has an accident. He was paralyzed from neck to in his 4 limbs, and he's amazing. He's such a optimistic guy. He trained like a professional swimmer twice a day, 3 to 4 hours in the pool, and he always came 4th place, which is the most frustrating place in Paralympics game. It is his 4th games, and finally has a gold, and we are all so excited for him, and he was so excited. The first Muslim Israeli athletes ever who won a medal in the Olympics or Paralympics games.
All right, so in total, we have 33 athletes in about a dozen sports. Where else do you think we have the best chances of medaling?
I think the best chance for medaling will come from, first of all, for swimming. We have 3 potential swimming. Iyad, of course, and he has the 50 meters as well to swim in the next days. And Mark Malia and Ami Dadon, that they are both world record holders. So I think the main medals will come from the swimming, but we hope for medals from rowing and shooting as well. We have very good athletes in both. And the big surprise can come maybe tomorrow even from, we didn't expect it from Caroline Tabib in the table tennis, because if tomorrow morning she will beat the Thailand athletes from Thailand, she will have a bronze medal. So this is really will be a big surprise.
Okay, Ron, again, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be with us, and good luck with the rest of the games. We're all rooting for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Finally, before we go, it's time to learn some Hebrew with the latest of our limited weekly lessons from our friends at Ulpan O.
היי, אורלי, מה קורה?
בסדר.
אוי, את עצובה, אורלי?
לא, אני לא עצובה, אבל אני רוצה לאכול, ואין לי סנדוויץ'.
זה בסדר, אורלי. יש לי עוד סנדוויץ'.
באמת? איזה סנדוויץ' זה?
סנדוויץ' טונה.
באמת? אני אוהבת סנדוויץ' טונה. תודה, יואל.
בבקשה. עכשיו את שמחה?
כן, עכשיו אני שמחה מאוד.
All right, let's take a look now at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
For this last weekend of summer vacation time, you can expect, of course, mostly sunny skies. But in the next 24 hours, meteorologists calling for warm lows between 21 to 29 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow, Friday, temperatures getting to between 31 to 42 degrees Celsius, depending on where you are in Israel. Now, Shabbat Shalom, and back to the studio with Aaron.
And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.22 shekels to the American dollar and 2.56 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.